Live Performance Safety Protocol, a detailed investigation into the December 31st aerial incident. The final night of the year is always charged with electricity, countdowns echoing across stages, spotlights sweeping excited crowds, and performers preparing to deliver the kind of spectacle audiences wait all year to see. But behind the dazzling lights and perfectly timed choreography lies an intricate web of safety systems, technical teams, and protocols designed to protect the very people who make these moments unforgettable. When even one component in this carefully constructed system fails, the results can range from a minor disruption to a life-threatening emergency. The December 31st event, in which a performer's safety cable was allegedly not locked properly during an aerial sequence, shocked both fans and industry professionals. The incident not only intensified concerns about the complexities of live performance safety, but it also reignited discussions about accountability, training, and the unseen pressures placed on production crews working under extreme time constraints. In the hours leading up to the performance, rehearsals reportedly ran as usual. The rigging team, responsible for securing wires, harnesses, pulleys, swivels, and load-bearing points, followed its structured checklist, at least on paper. Aerial work is one of the highest-risk components of stagecraft. Unlike ground choreography, it relies on physics, machine integrity, human coordination, and absolute precision. Even a single misalignment in a locking carabiner can endanger a performer suspended dozens of feet above the stage. That night, the show featured a dramatic aerial introduction. The performer was meant to ascend from offstage, glide over the audience in a slow arc, and land at center stage as lights burst in synchronization with the New Year countdown. According to backstage witnesses who later discussed the incident anonymously, something felt off before the performer even left the ground. The cable appeared to be attached, but one of the double locking systems may not have fully clicked into place. In high-quality stage rigging equipment, locking mechanisms typically require two confirmations: a mechanical lock and a manual verification. The mechanical lock ensures the device is sealed, while the manual verification, usually a tactile, visual, and audible three-step process, provides redundancy. When done correctly, the system is extraordinarily reliable. But reliability dissolves the moment any step is rushed or skipped. As the performance began, cameras captured the performer rising, but the tension in the wires seemed inconsistent, slightly looser than expected, then tightening abruptly. Though most viewers assumed it was a stylistic effect or part of the choreography, trained riggers watching the footage noticed the irregular movement immediately. A correctly secured aerial wire should maintain steady tension throughout the ascent. Any jerking motion can signal improper locking or uneven weight distribution. The performer continued their ascent, unaware that a crucial link between them and gravity might not have been secured to industry-standard safety expectations. The spotlights masked most of the issue to the untrained eye, but the backstage crew, watching from the monitors, felt the surge of panic that only professionals in their field could understand. A single slip, a half-fastened latch, or a partially engaged lock could cause catastrophic failure. When the performer reached the highest suspension point, around 40 seconds into the sequence, members of the rigging crew were already shouting cues into their headsets. Stage managers rushed to the side wing, monitoring every possible contingency plan. In aerial performances, emergency descent systems can sometimes be deployed, but only if the performer is secured strongly enough for controlled lowering. When a harness or cable is suspected to be compromised, the margin of error narrows dangerously. Any rapid movement can do more harm than good. Fortunately, the performer landed safely moments later, though the tension backstage was palpable. Afterward, a quiet scramble unfolded behind the curtains. Technical supervisors gathered immediately, reviewing footage, checking the gear piece by piece, and interviewing the crew responsible for that segment of the show. What they found, or what they believed they found, set off a wave of internal concern. The secondary lock on the cable appeared not to have been fully engaged. The allegation sent shivers across the production and event management industries, raising questions not only about potential negligence, but also about systemic problems within large-scale entertainment events. Live performances, especially broadcast events, operate under immense pressure. Schedules are condensed, rehearsals are often limited by venue availability, and production teams must execute complex builds within hours rather than days. Under these conditions, errors are more likely, not because of incompetence, but because of exhaustion, understaffing, conflicting instructions, or simple human oversight. And yet, the performer's life depends on a flawlessly executed system. In the days following the incident, safety analysts began exploring what might have gone wrong. One theory suggested that the double-locking mechanism may have been partially obstructed during the final equipment check. Sweat, costume material, or stage fog residue can occasionally interfere with rigging components. Another theory proposed that the crew, rushing to meet broadcast deadlines, might have misheard or misunderstood cues during the pre-performance lock-in. Communication errors are among the most common causes of backstage mistakes, especially when multiple departments are involved. Wardrobe, harness technicians, riggers, stunt coordinators, and show callers all give or receive instructions in rapid succession. At the heart of the investigation is a much larger conversation. How can live events ensure absolute safety when the environment itself is built on speed, spectacle, and constant change? Entertainment events often pride themselves on innovation. Flying rigs, rotating stages, hydraulic lifts, pyrotechnics, and digital projections. Each new technical element increases the potential for error unless safety protocols evolve with equal urgency. Many experts argue that the industry is heavily dependent on crew expertise, but lacks standardized regulatory oversight. Unlike aviation or construction, where national-level guidelines dictate every detail of safety procedure, the entertainment industry often relies on internal company policies and voluntary compliance standards. Some productions adhere to exceptionally strict safety rules, others do not. And when a performer's life is suspended on a cable above thousands of viewers, inconsistency becomes unacceptable. Another key angle explored in the aftermath of the December 31st incident was training. Riggers undergo specialized certification processes, but event management companies sometimes hire temporary. The hours after the December 31st incident unfolded with a tension that clung to every hallway, every dressing room, every dimly lit corner of the venue. While the audience celebrated the new year without suspecting anything had gone wrong, the backstage world operated under a very different atmosphere, one thick with adrenaline, disbelief, and the heavy realization of what could have happened. For the performer who had just stepped off the aerial rig, the night felt like a blur. The roar of the crowd was still echoing in their ears, but beneath that thrill was a tremor of unease they couldn't fully shake. Something about the flight had felt unstable, even though they had forced themselves to stay in character, smile through the unpredictable tugs of the cable, and perform as though everything was flawlessly planned. The crew members closest to the rigging station watched the performer return with shaken faces. One rigger in particular, who had worked aerial shows for over a decade, seemed unable to lift his eyes from the carabiner in his hands. Under the harsh backstage lights, the locking mechanism gleamed faintly, and that faint gleam, so small, so seemingly insignificant, held the entire weight of the evening. He snapped the lock open and closed again, checking, rechecking, pressing his thumb against the latch, listening for the usual crisp metallic click. The sound came, but not with the same strength. Something was off. And it wasn't just the equipment. It was the sensation that the system designed to protect a human life had faltered yet again under the pressure of spectacle. Meanwhile, stage managers hovered in a tight cluster around the monitors. They replayed the footage in slow motion, frame by frame, their eyes scanning for the precise second where the tension shifted unnaturally. The moment the performer lifted into the air, the wire had sagged a degree too low before tightening abruptly, barely noticeable to a casual viewer, but glaringly obvious to trained specialists. That single motion was enough to set off alarms in their minds. The realization that millions of viewers had just watched a near-miss live was overwhelming. Even more overwhelming was the knowledge that if timing, weight distribution, or equipment failure had shifted by even an inch, the outcome could have been catastrophic. At the far side of the stage, the assistant director paced in frantic loops, headset pressed so tightly against their ear that their knuckles turned white. They had spent weeks crafting this moment. The dramatic aerial entrance, the timed pyrotechnics, the synchronized spotlight bursting right as the performer landed. It was meant to be the highlight of the show. Instead, it became the highlight of every safety meeting for the weeks to come. Their pacing only stopped when the head of rigging approached them, voice low but trembling with a seriousness that forced everything else to silence. "We nearly lost them," he muttered, not dramatically, not accusingly, but as someone acknowledging a truth too heavy to ignore. The performer, still in costume, was seated nearby, trying to catch their breath. They weren't crying, but their eyes had that dazed, too wide look of someone replaying a moment over and over inside their mind. The uneven lift, the sudden jolt midair, the way their harness had felt like it shifted, slightly off-center. Their hands, still gloved from the performance, tightened around the bottle of water someone had offered them. Everything felt unreal. They had rehearsed this act dozens of times, each one flawless, each one supported by a team they trusted with their life. But trust felt fragile now, like a thin thread stretched too tight. A safety coordinator knelt beside them, speaking softly but urgently. They asked questions. "Did you feel movement on the left side of the harness? Did anything feel loose? Did the pulley drag at any point?" The performer tried to answer, but it was difficult to separate instinct from adrenaline. Everything happened too quickly, too brightly, too loudly. The coordinator took notes anyway, knowing that even fragmented answers could help determine whether the mistake had been human error, mechanical failure, or a combination of small oversights that had snowballed into a dangerous near-disaster. In the upper catwalks, 2 technicians climbed toward the grid to inspect the anchor points. Their flashlights cut across steel beams and coils of rigging lines, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. Up there, away from the noise below, the reality felt sharper. Every bolt, every clamp, every steel bracket had to endure immense stress during the performance, and any flaw in the system could escalate into catastrophe. The technicians worked methodically, checking torque pressure, testing load-bearing strength, ensuring none of the beams had vibrated loose during earlier rehearsals. One technician paused, staring at a subtle scuff on the metal casing around the pulley wheel. "This shouldn't be here," he whispered. The mark looked like friction burn, evidence that something had dragged harder than it should have. That tiny, telling mark became another thread in the growing tapestry of concern. By now, word of the incident had spread throughout the entire backstage crew. Makeup artists whispered about how pale the performer looked after landing. Costume designers murmured about the unexpected strain marks on the harness lining. Camera operators exchanged uneasy glances as they reviewed their footage. Every department felt complicit, even if they had nothing to do with the rigging. In the tightly interconnected world of live production, everyone shares responsibility, and everyone feels the weight of a brush with danger. Outside, the crowd still cheered, unaware of the chaos behind the scenes. The contrast was surreal, bright fireworks bursting overhead, while inside, specialists talked in hushed, urgent tones about what nearly happened. It was a reminder of the duality of live entertainment, the world the audience sees and the world behind the curtain that keeps that illusion alive. As the night stretched into the early morning hours, the investigation deepened. The crew gathered around a long table, the safety coordinator leading a tense debrief. They replayed footage again, examined the carabiner under magnifying glasses, tested the lock repeatedly until they could mimic the partial engagement that had occurred. They discovered that under specific pressure angles, the lock could appear closed even when it wasn't fully secured, something that should have been caught during the final double check. But when people are rushing, when countdowns are echoing, when cues are flying from every direction, the margin for error expands in dangerous ways.